Hello there. We are going to live to talk about the sensory system, kind of do a little sensory 101 today. And it is perfect timing here in the US right before a Thanksgiving holiday where the sensory system comes into play quite a bit. If we haven't met, my name is Julie Hirschberg. I'm a neurologic physical therapist. I am the owner and founder of re+active Therapy and Wellness. I'm in the Los Angeles area, and actually I've been taking some time off to be with my family, and a lot of sensory pieces have come to mind through many experiences. So this has been top of my mind. We also had a wonderful update this morning from our OT student. Her name is Gabby. So Gabby, in case you see this, thank you. She did a sensory 101 update for us and really organized a lot of the materials that we have for the sensory system here at re+active. So if you didn't know this about me, I'm just kind of obsessed with the sensory system. So it is something that I think is often overlooked in neurologic disorders and in many neurologic disorders. And I think generally in humans as a whole, we don't often pay attention to it for ourselves, for the people around us. And I think about this a lot when we have changes to our schedules and our systems, much like we do around holidays. This can be really disruptive. So let's dive in. First of all, if you're a clinician, when we think about the sensory system, and even when I teach the sensory system to other doctor of physical therapy students, we often think about primary sensation, like can people feel things? Do they have proprioception? Do they have a vestibular insult? Can they feel sharp dull or temperature? So very basic primary sensation. And the real purpose usually is to screen for some kind of issue in the sensory system. So a peripheral nerve injury, spinal cord injury, maybe even a brain pattern of sensory loss. So that, I think, especially if you're a physical therapist, that is what you're thinking of. Now, you might get fancy and you might test higher order sensations. So graphesthesia, the ability to sense a pattern. We typically do something where we trace a letter or number on the hand, but you can also do it on any body part. Or you could test 2-point discrimination, so the ability to feel whether it's 1 or 2 points touching you. Or you could test stereognosis, so the ability to manipulate objects and identify them. Those are higher order sensations. Those are organized in a different part of the brain. And let me grab the brain actually for us all. Because if we're going to talk about the sensory system, we should have the brain. So in our primary somatosensory cortex, that's right about here, it's towards the back of the brain. That's where that primary sensation is organized. The secondary sensation is the posterior part of the parietal cortex, and that's things like stereognosis and graphesthesia. That's where they are organized. And those actually help us to discover, if somebody has a stroke, we can actually localize that lesion based on where that person has a deficit in sensation. But we need to go deeper when it comes to the nervous system, not just testing to determine a deficit, but testing to understand how those sensory systems are integrated together. And this can be called many things. So sensory processing, sensory integration, those are two of the big names. And these are things that on the most part, when I go into the literature, this is in the occupational therapy literature for the most part, not entirely, but mostly. And I've learned a ton from my occupational therapy colleagues. And I want to give a big shout out to my colleagues at Mass General Hospital, two of the great OTs who have published this work in functional neurologic disorders have shared with me and our Brain Bites group all about sensory integration in functional neurologic disorders. But what I'm going to tell you and share about sensory integration and sensory processing has much more applicability than just functional neurologic disorders. We talk about this with dystonia. We talk about this with vestibular dysfunction or chronic dizziness. We talk about this in concussion. We talk about this in pain in a big way. So, and this, again, I'm going to tell you, take this home for Thanksgiving. And I'll give you a little snippet of this. So, for example, when it comes to nervous system regulation as a whole, which I've talked about a lot in recent lives because we were talking about functional seizures, which have a lot to do with nervous system regulation. The sensory system plays a big piece of our nervous system regulation. And I've been thinking about this a lot because my sister just had a baby. And if y'all have had babies or any other periods of intense sleep deprivation, you know how dysregulated you can feel. Maybe it is that a certain sound, like the door closing, sets you off. That's your sensory system. That's your hearing, right? So why is that? Why does that happen if we're sleep deprived? Because our nervous system is dysregulated. And I'm just going to give a shout out to Lily because she's a fairly new mom too. And so she's saying me. You know it, right? You know it. I wish I had this language when I was a new mom because I didn't. And I didn't understand my sensory system. And I didn't know that when I was sleep deprived, I could actually bring a lot of other pieces in to bring regulation to my nervous system through my sensory system. Some of those things you find kind of naturally. You go, ooh, I love these smells, right? Like, ooh, I love a good oil. I love peppermint. I love the smell of pumpkin pie baking, which it is right now. So some of those naturally come, but I gotta tell you, if you know a little bit more about your sensory system, you're gonna find so many things that can bring regulation to you in those times when it's hard. Like maybe you're sitting around a dinner table with a really cranky uncle that makes you really uncomfortable. And so you could use a sensory technique to help regulate. Maybe you're sleep deprived because you're a new mom. Maybe your schedule is just off because it's a holiday. Maybe you're eating food that you're not typically eating, and that makes your system feel a little bit off. It could be many things. Having sensory tools, whether that's sensory meals, we'll talk about that, or sensory snacks, can be really helpful. I see some questions here. What does it mean when I don't feel acupuncture needles as much on my left leg compared to my right leg? What a great question. That can be many different things. So when you're assessed, often by a physical therapist, but could also be by an occupational therapist, you actually get tested for that primary sensation. Do you have the ability to sense light touch, deep pressure, vibration, sharp, dull sensations? Now, I know because I've received the acupuncture, some of those you actually can't feel. And that's a good thing. Now, differences side to side can mean many things. Is there an actual difference? Or is there a perceptual difference? Is one side more sensitive than the other side? And we test it. I would probably do 2-point discrimination to test that sensitivity. And then I might actually look to see what does that sensory map look like for you side to side, and where does it change? And then I would want to work that into treatment. Particularly now, for some people, they have little differences side to side. My left side feels different than my right side. I'm right-handed. That's pretty normal. And it doesn't mean that there's a pathology there. But if a person is sensing that that is part of the issue with their function, so maybe that's why they're having difficulty walking or doing the stairs or getting up from a chair or rolling in bed or all of those things, then we want to investigate it. For some people, it's not the main issue. What a great question. Another is, what does it mean in regards to sensory system? Oh, okay. Sorry. That was the same question. So I hope I answered that. Yeah. And then there's my student sleeps in second period, but he's in high school. So, Sarah, great question. She takes lots of data now. So I'm so glad you're getting data, because if you're seeing some of these changes in a person, we really kind of want to understand why. And look at, because the sleep system is so intricately involved with our autonomic nervous system and our sensory system, when we see sleep changes, or vice versa, when sleep is disrupted and we see nervous system regulation, we really want to look at those components of the sensory system and the autonomic nervous system. So back to this question too, when a person has a tremor on that side too. So I'm glad you asked that. So this is a really good segue into when we want to look at the sensory system. Number one is when a person tells me it's important. So like this person is sharing, this is important. They can't feel one side more than the other, and it's very significant. This is important to them. So I shared this earlier today. The person you are working with is the most wise about themselves, and you should listen to them. So if they are describing this sensory difference and noting that it is important, you should go there first. So sometimes, actually a lot of times, people ask me, where do I start? There's so many things for this person. That person that I'm working with always tells me where to start, and I just need to listen. So for you, you're telling me it's a significant difference and it's contributing to tremor. And what I would say is, for a lot of folks with tremor, and especially functional tremor, the sensory system is involved. And often it is that the body, that the map in that sensory cortex that we were talking about is skewed. And when that sensory map is skewed and maybe not giving good feedback to the brain, because that's what the sensory system does, it gives feedback. And if it's incorrect feedback or not complete feedback, the brain uses what it has and may produce something like a tremor. It may produce something like dystonia. It may produce something like weakness. And if we haven't looked at the sensory system, we will actually miss some of the why this might be occurring. So let's talk too about how the sensory systems integrate. So one of my favorite ways to look at this and think about this is from my good friend and colleagues, Jamie, Catherine. They're our vestibular gurus. They taught our positive spin course, which is on sale right now, by the way. We do a little gratitude sale if you're a clinician. I just love this course. But they talk a lot about the integration of the sensory systems, the vestibular system, the somatosensory system, which includes that proprioceptive pieces, and the visual system. So those big three really give us a sense of where we are in space and where we are when we're moving. And one of the really cool things that I learned from Jamie and Catherine, or they really kind of hooked me on looking at the literature and the pieces of this, is the reflexes that go from our inner ear and our vestibular system to the autonomic nervous system. And I was thinking about this just yesterday. I was hanging out, helping my sister, brand new baby boy, and I got to sit in the rocking chair. And if any of y'all have been to re+active, you know we really love our rocking chairs, and that movement forward and back is a very soothing sensation to me. So I recognize, because everybody's sensory system is different, it's not a soothing sensation to everybody. So we do a sensory profile on everybody that we see at re+active, and it actually tells us a lot about what is that person's sensory makeup. We need to dig a little deeper. We do the sensory profile. It's really like a screen. Then we could dig deeper to understand why. Why is that person wired like that? So as someone said, some people get dizzy in the rocking chair. Exactly. So for one person, it might be a soothing movement. So that actual stimulation of forward and back, it stimulates the otoliths, which are a part of your inner ear that senses motion in relation to gravity. So forward translation, up and down translation, as well as tilting. And that is a big part of that rocking movement. Now, for some folks, the way their nervous system and their sensory system is wired, that is very soothing to their system. And again, there is that reflex. It is an autonomic to otolith. So it's a vestibular autonomic reflex and feedback loop. Now, for somebody else, that, as you mentioned here in the comment, that might actually make you dizzy. Now, you may have a mismatch of information. So the visual information with the vestibular, with the sensory, they all need to integrate and match. And sometimes one of those systems is firing too loud or too fast, and we need to calibrate them. So we assess to see which one and how they are integrating, and then we can treat it and help it calibrate for that person. Okay, and Lily, the Brain PT, can you guide us on how we can start performing a sensory profile? Absolutely. So the sensory profile is a test, and I actually have it up here. I wonder, I'll put a link. So you all know how I do a newsletter every week. I'll put a link for clinicians. But hey, patients too, as I said, the people I work with are the most wise. You could self-assess your sensory profile. It's actually a series of questions that goes through your sensory preferences, and it takes about 15 minutes. It's 60 questions, and it looks at your response to taste, smell, movement, visual, touch, and auditory sensation. So you can, it is a test that we pay for to administer. It's not a free test, but you can take a look at it, download a PDF and see what it looks like. But I value paying for these things because somebody created it, and I'm paying for that for them. So great way to start. And absolutely PTs, OTs, speech therapists, psychologists would be really helpful to use the sensory profile. I'm going to go back up here. Hey, Ethnicity Gardens, it says, this makes so much sense. My ear was damaged and now I'm having serious sensory issues. So yes, that makes so much sense to me too, because if we have an inner ear issue that changed our vestibular sense, we might rely very heavily on our vision or even our sensation from our body, from our feet, to tell us where we are in space. And that can become kind of problematic. Even after the vestibular system has healed, people may find that they don't really get recalibrated. They keep overusing their visual system. They're not integrating the systems together as they should be. Like, if I kind of think of them as like cogs in a wheel, and if one of them is kind of going like this, like really fast, and the other one's going slow, they're not calibrated. They're not keeping in sync with each other. And it can lead to intense dizziness, nausea, inability to move, and really high sensitivity visually because of that, a high sensitivity to movement as well. And those are all things that I want to say can get better because, well, one, I've seen them get better, and they just need the right rehab. And if you are a clinician, by the way, I'm going to just do a shout out to our positive spin course, because I think this course was the most life-changing for me in helping me understand the integration of the sensory systems so that I can treat it not separately, vestibular visual sensation, but treat it together, and to really see how those pieces integrate and can help bring people relief. So the first step in Sensory 101, like Lily asked, is to really understand that person's sensory profile. And the second step is to understand their sensory integration, which is you need to test. You need to test the visual system, the vestibular system, the somatosensory system. We want to look at, and this is where the sensory profile comes in handy, we want to look at that person's sensitivity and registration for things like sound and taste and smell as well. So again, that sensory profile, highly, highly recommended. And if you're a person with, if you're just a person, just a human, I should say, you don't even have to have a neurologic disorder. I think having the sensory profile for any human is so helpful. One of the things that I know about myself is that I am sensory seeking. And maybe you could tell that because I move a lot. I'm even standing here on my treadmill. I try not to walk on it as I'm doing videos because it's kind of distracting, but I love to move. And actually I can get pretty dysregulated when I'm not moving. And so you could imagine then if you were a person like me, so you're that person that like loves jumping and spinning, maybe you were a gymnast. I was a dancer, loved it. And then you had a surgery, or hey, you had a baby. Hey, you were on bed rest. Hey, you started a sedentary job. And you're starting to wonder why the ticking of the clock is annoying you so much, or why you startle when somebody slams a door. So those are some sound sensitivities that might come when you are dysregulated because you haven't moved. But you need to know that might be part of your sensory profile. And then I would say one step further is to really understand why. Is there a vestibular piece? Is there a proprioceptive piece there? So at Reactive, we work with a lot of folks who are autistic, and there are unique sensory preferences that come with a neurodivergent brain. And it's so helpful to understand that so that we could build the environment that affirms those preferences and allows the person to really be able to thrive. And again, I've learned so much of this from my OT colleagues. So there's so many pieces on the sensory system. I literally have like all of these notes. But the last piece that I really wanted to hit on was this idea of planning sensory meals and sensory snacks. So particularly if you're in the US and you're going into this holiday centered around food, the idea of meals and snacks are perfect. And when we're talking about sensory meals, sometimes called a sensory diet, I just don't like the term diet. So sensory meals, sensory snacks, what you want to think of first is identify the needs that you have. Or if you're a clinician working with a patient, what sensory needs do they have? And what activities help those needs? So this is a list, and you could do a checklist with a person. Then you're going to help that person create sensory meals. Those are bigger things, I would say, that provide a large amount of sensory input. And then there are sensory snacks, smaller things. So I'm going to share with you one of my favorite sensory snacks, because I have to sit at a computer for longer periods than I like and that I think my body likes. One of the things that I do is have music on, and I will actually rock side to side in my seat. I think I would do really well with even a rocking chair to work with. So I tend to sit at a very high stool so I can easily rock and get my feet on the ground. That's a little sensory snack. I have another one. I'm going to open this little box. One of my patients, I'm going to tell you almost everything I've learned from my patients. I just value them so much. I don't know if you can hear these, but they make a little kind of bell sound. They also make a sound as you're moving them. So I like to move them in my hand, but this very soothing bell sound, again, I don't know if you can hear it in my headphone here, is very soothing to me sensory wise. Holding these because they're a little bit cold, also soothing to me. Now, some people may find warm very soothing. I happen to find the cold very soothing. And the brain PT says, wow, my brain likes the sound of those little bells. I'll put a link in my newsletter for these. I think I actually got them on Amazon. Again, it was a patient that had recommended them to me, and now I use them a lot. There's different sizes. These are actually a little big for my hands, but a smaller size is kind of nice. You can move them in your hand and rotate them, which is even just kind of a nice like movement or fidget. But again, Lily, I'm gonna buy you these, okay? All of you, I don't know if you all know Lily, the brain PT. She's been a member of our Brain Bites for a very long time. Just an amazing neuro PT and woman. I'm sending these to you, okay? I'm gonna just call them little brain balls. They have an actual name and I'm drawing a blank on it, but I do really love them. That's a sensory snack. Now that's for me, right? So not everybody needs chiming bells. And in fact, it might be really off-putting for other people. So this is why you need to assess, and it doesn't mean you just throw a bunch of things. You do the sensory profile, you do sensory testing, you help that person identify what are things that are calming to them, what's energizing to them, and they build either a whole sensory meal or a sensory snack. So I give you two examples of sensory snacks. A sensory meal, one of the meals that I need sensory wise is a lot of movement, usually combined with weight. And this is something I recently discovered. It's funny to me because I did grow up as a dancer, and I thought, well, I kind of know how to move my body. Not really. I run into things all of the time. The wall, the furniture, all kinds of things, not always aware where my body is. I do so much better with weight on my body or lifting weights. So a sensory meal that I use, I try to do this every day, is lifting heavy weights. Now you might say, well, that's also exercise. And yes, it is. I get my heart rate up. I'm doing strength training. But for me, where I benefit most is the sensory input of the heavy weight. So weight is an amazing tool. You definitely have to have this in your arsenal if you are a clinician. Weight, sometimes very lightweight. For me, actually, the heavier, the better, is an awesome sensory input. Weight gives input into the vestibular system. It gives input into the proprioceptive system. So if you test somebody in their sensory profile, maybe they have a lower registration, maybe they're sensory seeking, and you might actually test out what the input of weight is like for them and find that they could either have a sensory snack, so maybe they wear a very light weighted vest, or they can have a whole sensory meal and do a 45-minute lifting heavy weights type of activity. That was my sensory meal today. It was awesome. For me, as well, one of my other sensory meals is movement. A lot of movement. So this is, I think, why I like to run marathons. I love pounding the pavement and moving up and down a lot. I love dancing. I love swaying. I love listening to music. So all of those are ways that I build up my sensory stores. Now, again, you can imagine some of the times when I was most dysregulated is when my sensory needs were not met. So when I had new babies at home was a big one. I wasn't moving as much. I wasn't sleeping. So my nervous system regulation was really out of whack as it was. There was a lot more sounds in my house. So that was another sensory need that wasn't being met. And I wish that I had known then what I know now as my needs for the sensory system. I would have had some little soothing, chiming, cold, chiming balls to soothe me. I would have gone for slow, long walks. I would have sat in a rocking chair even more. And again, this is all specific to me, but I just didn't know. So you know what? They should be doing the sensory profile on all new moms. I'm telling you, we all need it. All humans need it. I think it gives us so much great information about how our sensory system is working and integrating together. And that's why it's standard practice for us at Reactive. We do it in OT. We talk about it as a group. And oh my gosh, so this is what the Brain PT is saying. I need it. And I'm going to tell you, go check it out. Grab the PDF. Do it for yourself. See where you're at. And I think it will tell you a lot about what you need. And then you can build sensory snacks and meals into your day. Sarah has a great suggestion. If you want something unique, we did weighted lab buddies where we fill knee-high socks with rice and then glued with magic stitches. Then you put them in a microwave with essential oils. You don't have to spend a lot of money on some of these sensory pieces. I love that. It's weighted. That stimulates the vestibular system if you're moving, like the otoliths. But it's proprioceptive information. It smells. I love a good lavender or eucalyptus scent. You could put them on your lap. I love that. So thank you, Sarah. Sarah's our resident rec therapist in our Brain Bites group, and she always has all these great ideas. So, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to just make sure I didn't miss any other questions. But keep the questions coming. I love hearing from you. And again, if you are a clinician, we do a sale every single year at this time. It's called our gratitude sale, and it is for you. I'm very thankful for you. In fact, you all keep me going on a lot of days. So I really thank you for that. And so we do a sale on all of our courses. I talked about the positive spin course because that was my favorite for learning about the otoliths. And but also our neuroplasticity course with Mike Studer, our mini course, the F&D mini course, the dystonia mini course, all on sale just for this week. So if you're a clinician, go grab those. If you are a person with a neurologic disorder, I'll just give you a little heads up here. Every year, we also do a Cyber Monday sale on all of our wellness programs. So these are the classes that we do online or in person that are adapted for people with neurologic disorders. Maybe my favorite is the yoga class. And, but I love all of them. The boxing class, we have this lovely class for people with FND called Recenter, which is a brain-body connection class that has a great group in it. Everything is 25% off for people on our Cyber Monday deal. You can only get it on Monday though. So stay tuned. If you're on our newsletter, you'll get an email from us that says, hey, our Cyber Monday deal is here. You can get personal training. You can get one-on-one yoga therapy. You could get a drop-in class. You could get a whole year. You could get the whole year membership for 25% off. But you could join us in our wellness, which is led by our amazing therapists and wonderful personal trainers. And I just love it. So thank you so much for joining me tonight before the holiday here in the US. And I just appreciate you. So much gratitude for you and for your questions and your curiosity. I'm so thankful. Have a wonderful evening and have a great holiday. I will see you soon.